of a lot of some focus by the United States Congress and by a lot of NGOs, quite frankly, that have kind of raised this issue and made us all aware of the terrible effects of the LRA and Mr. Coney. Ambassador Yamamoto, where do counter-LRA efforts rank on the list of priorities for U.S. foreign policy in Africa? And we've talked a little bit about the legislation that has passed, but I guess the question is: are current legislative authorities and funding levels sufficient for achieving U.S. policy goals with respect to the LRA? Because ultimately, our goal here is to make sure that the war criminals are captured and brought before the International Criminal Court, and that the LRA is ended. I'm just curious, from where you sit, do you have all the tools you need, and where does it rank on the list of priorities and foreign policy priorities in Africa?
Certainly, in the priorities of where the LRA stands, it ranks very high, and the reason why is because not only I think we share a common perspective with the U.S. Congress passing the legislation on the LRA, and of course the rewards for justice. That kind of corresponds to what we've been trying to do over the last few years. And if you look at our budgeting and assistance levels, that kind of tells you, and also the focus that we've given to the problem underscores the commitment we have to this effort. And the reason why is because it is in our national interest. The more that countries like Uganda, CAR, and the Congo, and if you talk about this scourge expanding to other countries, those countries then have to devote and dedicate much more of their own personal wealth and budgets to fight this scourge when they could be doing it to promote what we would like to do, democratic values, accountability, women's educations, development of health and educational issues. So those are things that kind of integrate with each other, but for us it ranks as a very high priority within our overall budgeting.
And to you or anybody else here, I mean, do you have the necessary authority to do what you need to do to accomplish this policy objective?
From a development perspective and humanitarian perspective, we have resources. The problem that we have is access, and primarily into eastern Congo, into the eastern DRC. And without access, obviously, it's very difficult to provide services.
Mr. Pollack, do you have?
Yeah, I agree with both my colleagues. I think on balance, we certainly have what we need. We're finding ways to respond to the gaps that we've identified in terms of tackling this problem in the past, including providing support to the UPDF with regard to logistics and movement. In that respect, certainly the Section 1206 authority, I believe, will come in quite handy, and just again echo the support for the legislation to expand the war crimes program.
Okay. Ugandan and South Sudanese sources have recently publicly accused the Sudanese government of renewing its support for Joseph Kony. Are these allegations credible, and what information does the U.S. government have on the possibility that Sudan is supporting the LRA? And have Sudanese authorities shared information on reported LRA movements within their territory with the U.S. or partner forces engaged in counter-LRA operations? Ambassador?
Yeah, we've investigated the allegations. Obviously, several years ago, the answer is that there were persistent and consistent reports that the Sudanese were providing that assistance and support to the LRA operations. But within the last several years, we have not found that credible evidence that has been done. Now, obviously, the LRA goes into Sudan in and out. They've been in Congo. They've been in CAR to seek refuge. But with any information or allegations, we're going to pursue that aggressively. We have been in touch with not only the Khartoum government, but also with the Juba government and both sides, and trying to look at exactly where the LRA are, what support and assistance is being provided to them. If I may add...
Well, has the Sudanese government been forthcoming and sharing information about LRA activities, whether they're seeking sanctuary or
it's been very difficult to get information from Khartoum on a wide range of issues because of the difficulty in our own personal bilateral relationship, and also because of the hard issues that we've been discussing with the Khartoum government over issues on Kordofan, on
Right.
Darfur, et cetera. But it does not mean that we're not going to continue to pursue those issues, and we are. But Congressman, just one last thing on the other point: do we have the assets and the tools and resources? And the answer is that obviously we could use more, particularly in communications, the issue of rehabilitation, reconciliation, and also pursuit of training and interoperability for the national armies, particularly the CAR and the DRC.
Has the administration kind of put forward a proposal of additional?
We're looking at
Okay.
at the best needs, the best programs that can meet the needs of these armies. And of course, the problem is that the Ugandan forces, CAR, DRC, there are different levels of development, and trying to get them to the same level is a challenge.
Well, but it would obviously be helpful to us, if the administration said we need
Yes.
X, then it's a lot easier for us then to, to
Yes.
to try to fight for it. So
Sure.
that kind of specificity would be helpful. Let me ask you, maybe whichever one of you guys want to answer this. We've there's been a lot of talk about the Ugandan Military human rights record, and I'd like to get your assessment of the Ugandan Military human rights record in the counter LRA deployment. To what extent and how are the Ugandan troops able to and committed to protecting civilians in LRA affected areas? Has the Ugandan troops engaged in any illicit natural resource exploitation in LRA affected areas? And how is the Ugandan military perceived by local communities in LRA affected areas? And do these perceptions affect its capacity to pursue the counter LRA mission? Maybe Mr. Pollack, you might be the best person to take that on.
Sure. So I would just say up front that we take very seriously any allegations of illicit activity or abuses by our partner forces. That said, we've heard very few substantiated allegations of any abuses by the UPDF over the last several years. And where there have been validated instances of abuses or illicit activity, the Ugandan government has taken action and has imposed military justice as appropriate. That said, we're constantly on the lookout. These allegations have been in the air as relates to these partner forces for a long time, and some of these partner forces have had contentious relationships with the communities they're operating in for many years. We're seeking to assist them in improving their civil-military relations in this respect. But I would just note that our forces are out there with them, and promoting a culture where military forces hold themselves accountable and act in a professional manner.
Thank you. Let me just follow up with you. In the 150-day review of the advisor deployments, what benchmarks were evaluated? For example, are you tracking how many LRA desertions there have been, particularly combatants, not just recent abductees, and how many senior LRA commanders have been captured or killed, and when will the next review take place?
So I would note that, this deployment has been subject to an ongoing review, and there are a series of benchmarks we applied, including some of the quantitative measures you noted. It's still, I think, in the fairly early going here, so employing simply quantitative measures is probably not adequate to evaluate the success of the deployment to date. But I would just note that the U.S. government, and certainly my colleagues can elaborate on this to a great degree, are taking a comprehensive approach to this problem. And we measure success in terms of the degree to which we can enhance the efforts of the partner militaries we're working with to end the threat of the LRA.
Just a question on USAID. I mean, given I'm just trying to understand the challenges that USAID has faced in implementing kind of the LRA-related programs in the Central African Republic, given that there is no bilateral USAID mission in that country. What steps is USAID taking to address these challenges?
The problem of access is not just in the CAR, it's also in the DRC, where we do have a very large presence. Unfortunately, that entire area bordering with the DRC from the CAR, that it's a huge area, and unfortunately there's very little infrastructure in the area, and also very few groups that work in those areas. So even if we ourselves were able to have a permanent presence there, we still wouldn't have the capacity to meet all the needs, even if security conditions were met. It would require a significant scaling up of local partners, international NGOs, and contractors to help meet the needs in the area.
Mr. Duncan, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I appreciate Ambassador Yamamoto being here. Testified on this same subject in Foreign Affairs recently, and I was sitting about as close as I am now, being a junior member of that committee as well. But I guess this is Mr. Pollack. To what extent is the Ugandan military willing and able to defeat the LRA?
Well, I would say that they're quite willing. The Ugandan government and the Ugandan military has invested a great deal of time, energy, and resources into pursuing the LRA.
Truly committed to the effort, you think?
I believe so. Yes, they are, and they're continuing this effort very robustly, deploying forces a long way from Uganda in an effort to end this threat to regional stability. I do think they are committed.
Right. How about the Congolese? How about are they willing to allow the Ugandan military on their soil to help defeat the LRA, and are they cooperating? It's a new subject to me, so I am very interested.
Sure. I would just say,
And Ambassador Yamamoto.
certainly Ambassador Yamamoto may want to take the first cut at this question because it's in many ways a diplomatic challenge given the historical relationship between the Congolese and the Ugandans.
Going to your first question, on Museveni and Kony, there is no love lost between the two. Obviously, Museveni takes it as a very personal issue to go after Kony. So I think personally that's a commitment that he's made, and the money and the troops that he's dedicated to that endeavor, I think, underscores that issue. As far as the interoperability of all these forces, yes, there are issues. The Congolese have been very insistent on sovereignty issues, and not only the Ugandan troops going into the DRC territory, but also on the other side, the Rwandans going to DRC in joint operations against the FDLR. Those have been very difficult discussions and coordination. But I think on the LRA portion, what President Kabila has done is that he said that he's using the U.S.-trained integrated brigade, the 391, to utilize to go after the LRA and remnants of the LRA within Congo. Now, we are negotiating and talking to Kabila to say, you got to do a little bit more as far as, let's say, look at other ways and opportunities we can coordinate with the Ugandan troops and the forces, et cetera. So those are issues that we are on negotiations. But let me underscore that President Kabila and President Museveni are, dedicated and committed to this endeavor.
Yeah. Let me ask us, when was the last time Joseph Kony was seen by Western media? Because, some of the things I've read is he's been absent. He hadn't been seen, identified by the Western world in quite a while. We're spending a lot of money to try to defeat this gentleman and the LRA. I guess the second question is, does the LRA continue in absence of Joseph Kony? Let's say he's eliminated in some capacity. Does the LRA continue to exist as a political faction or a warring faction? And either, it doesn't matter. It's not addressed to one particular person.
I'll turn to my colleagues too. I think in the case of the LRA, you're talking, how many core fighters are we talking about? Maybe 200 core fighters? You're talking 800, mostly Congolese, CAR, Sudanese people accompanying the essentially Acholi-based core fighters. And the issue comes in is, if you eliminate Kony, we feel and believe that that structure will begin to collapse. That doesn't mean that the fight is over. It's not, because you do have other fighters, and that's, Odiembo and Ogongan and the others.
Well, is there a second in command that would fill that, as we see in an Al-Qaeda type organization?
No, I think in the case of this LRA, and I also defer to the second group and their expertise on it, but the indications are that it will begin to collapse, maybe fracture. But that does not mean that it fight's over, because you're going to have to go after these local commanders, but it'd be much easier without Kony. And that's why he may not be seen, but his effects are still felt. And I think that will make our efforts to reconciliation and really ending this problem much, much easier.
If I may just connect this question with your prior question about the commitment of the UPDF. I think the fact that we haven't seen Joseph Kony in some years interacting with Western media reflects in part the constant pressure that the UPDF has the senior LRA commanders under. As my colleague said, there is a cadre of sort of longstanding leadership at the top of the LRA, and certainly it wouldn't. Regional stability would not descend instantaneously should they be removed, but we do think that they are critical to sustaining the coherence of the organization, and removing them from the battlefield would have a substantial effect.
I have nothing further. I yield back.
Yeah, I want one final question. I'm trying to say, what are the main challenges facing the U.S. advisor effort? I mean, we all want this to be successful. We don't want to be here 20 years from now talking about the same subject. I mean, we want to make sure that our advisors have what they need, and that the mission has what it needs in terms of resources. Like anything else, we understand there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And the end is, Joseph Kony is captured, the LRA disperses. So I understand what are the biggest challenges we have for our advisors, and and making certain that this effort is a success.
And I think that's kind of multifaceted. As far as what we're looking at is how do we create greater interoperability, command and control structures? How do we help give the necessary skill sets to these forces whose skill sets are really very different from each other, and cooperation is very, very difficult? How do you encourage that so that it enhances their capability to coordinate and go after Kony? And again, the goals and objectives that we have with our Special Forces unit is really to provide that capacity building. Ultimately, it's going to be to the UPDF, the Ugandas, and the other forces, the CAR in Congo, to go after Kony and to bring him to justice. And also not only Kony, but also his lieutenants and commanders. And so the challenges is a time factor. I mean, we need to have a lot of patience. You're talking an area that's huge. I guess the northwest part of the United States, with only maybe a battalion or two battalions to cover that wide swath of area. A second thing is that it's very difficult to look into the jungle areas and to identify. We could be, a mile away and not even know Kony is there because of the vegetation or the landscape and the environment. So there are those are physical challenges and environmental challenges. But ultimately, I think the greater the capacity skills we're giving to these forces, I think the more successful they will be over the end.
Any other?
Sure. I would just briefly amplify Ambassador Yamamoto's comments. I think the challenges have always been the same in terms of dealing with the LRA, and they involve regional coordination, geography, and time. In terms of the regional coordination piece, I think our advisors are playing a critical role in this respect, being a kind of connective tissue across the various regional militaries in establishing the operations fusion centers where these forces are working together. And to get back to the question about Congo, they are even present in Congo and working with the 391st and other parts of the Congolese military. On geography, I mean, this is a vast stretch of jungle, and it is difficult to traverse, but that's where the logistics support that we're providing, I think, comes in. And then time. I think everyone on this panel and everyone on the dais likewise appreciates the immense interest that exists now in the LRA and ending the threat of the LRA and in capturing Joseph Kony and bringing him to justice. But it does take time for our forces out there to build the rapport, to establish the forward operating bases, and then to get into the real meat of this mission, and that's working with the partners to fuse intelligence with their operations. So that strategic patience, I think, is a critical requirement as well.
And I just want to be clear. So there's no dispute here that progress is being made, and that we are, in fact, enabling the people of the region, giving them the ability and the equipment and the training so they can go after Joseph Kony and the LRA, because this is, as you pointed out, Ambassador, this is their fight, and we are assisting in that. But we're all in agreement that, you know, this policy that the administration has launched has resulted in the ball moving forward. I hate to use that analogy, but that's the only one I can think of right now. And that you know, and that what's going to happen is that we're going to hear from the administration in the not too distant future about some specifics in terms of whether it's equipment or personnel or monies or whatever that currently are lacking that might help again in the effort to enable the people of the region to be able to be successful in getting Joseph Kony. All right, that's accurate, right? Okay, good. Well, that's all I have. I have no further questions. I just want to thank you all for your collaborative efforts. I really believe that if Joseph Kony can be brought to justice and the LRA can be dispersed, it is not only an important milestone for the people of Africa, but it is an important signal to human rights abusers all over the world that when the world community gets mobilized, you know, they will be held accountable. And I think that's also a very powerful message that needs to be made clear. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.